Hello. Again, my name is Sharon Steed. I am a keynote speaker and empathy consultant, as well as a person who stutters. And I'm going to talk about that last one in a couple of minutes. But first, I wanted to just give you a little bit of background on me. I've done talks at companies and conferences all over the world, in countries and continents that I cannot believe that I have been to, and I have spoken in a ton of different industries, including obviously technology, also finance, human resources, just kind of across the gamut. I'm probably most known for my LinkedIn course. It's called Communicating with Empathy. And that's where I sort of align how we communicate, both at work and in our everyday lives, with being a little bit more empathetic in order to better connect with those around us. And so, I'm here today to talk about engaging empathy. And in order to, have that conversation, we first have to talk about, what empathy is. And so in order to, explain empathy, I am going to tell you a little bit more about myself and my own personal journey with communication, as well as communicating with empathy. So this is me. I'm around 3 years old. I know, I'm adorable. And this is around the age that I began to show some signs of stuttering. But my parents weren't, all that concerned, because a lot of people in my family have, some kind of speech impediment. And almost all of them, completely outgrew it by the time that they hit, 8 or 10 or 12. And so they didn't really do anything about it, like I was a cute little kid who, couldn't easily talk, and it was adorable. It quickly became not as adorable, because I began to develop these sort of communications neuroses. Every time I would open my mouth to say something, I would go through this very long and very tedious process of am I going to be able to say that word? Am I going to be able to say that sound? Okay, I need to think of another word to say in order to be able to get the word out correctly, and all of these things. And it just became, very apparent that, on days when I was fluent, it was, a good thing. It was a positive thing. On days when I stuttered, it was a negative thing. And so I sort of, took these feelings along with me for my entire life, right? I go through grade school and high school, I get into college, and my whole world sort of revolved around my communication and how that communication was coming across, towards other people, because that directly affected how I felt about myself. And so I had finally sort of come to this time in my life when I knew that I had to, overcome this fear. I had really isolated myself to the point where I wasn't really pursuing, the kind of career that I wanted to pursue. I wasn't building, very positive and sincere relationships with people, all because I was so afraid of the way that I spoke. And so I said, okay, how can I, overcome this fear? And I decided that I was just going to pursue public speaking. And now I know that that sounds completely crazy because I'm a person who did not talk to people. I just wouldn't talk. And I thought that if I could just give, 1 or 2 talks, I would completely be cured of this, terror I had of talking. And that did not happen. But what did happen was an entirely new life, as well as an entirely new career. And so this is me giving my first proper talk. It was an Ignite talk. And I don't know if conferences are still, doing those, but you basically get 5 minutes and your slides change automatically every, I think, 20 seconds or something like that. And so, obviously, as a person who has communications challenges, who is also terrified of talking, I thought it would be a great idea to time myself giving a talk when who knows how long it was going to actually take me to get through a talk itself. And it's very, obvious that this is my first talk because I used a pie chart to display 1%. Also, I am literally standing in front of my slides. So that's what happens when you give your first talk. You make a couple of mistakes, but hopefully I got my point across. And so it was through this whole experience of giving, talks and going to conferences and really, talking to people after my talks were completed is when I was introduced to this whole concept of, engaging empathy. Because I had spent my entire life being so afraid of just, talking to people because I didn't think that they would be able to get past how I sounded. But what was actually true was that all they cared about was what I had to say. And how I sounded actually made people a lot more invested and a lot more interested in what I was saying. So let's define, what empathy is. So the dictionary definition is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person. And so, I've always kind of had a problem with this definition because I feel like it doesn't, tell you the how of, truly being empathetic. And that's because empathy as a noun is an idea. It is intangible. It doesn't really have meaning until you give it, that meaning. And so, how do we, change empathy from this abstract concept to something that is tangible and doable in our day-to-day lives? And that's when it kind of dawned on me that empathy is incredibly similar to another concept that, everybody knows, but no one can really explain. And that concept is being in love. Oh. Now, when you are in love, like brand new love, it is incredibly overwhelming. It's perfect. It's amazing. It's so exciting. You feel like you can do absolutely anything as a result of this person who is your new love. You somehow have the time to send 100-word long text messages. I mean, I guess in COVID, all of us were doing dumb stuff like this. And you have to show everyone just how in love you are by doing extra dumb stuff like this. May this forever live in infamy. But as, time goes on, you begin to calm down, right? You really begin to get to know this person on the realist and most sincere, plane. You develop a relationship that is solid, and the foundation is almost unbreakable, right? But all of those new and amazing feelings, they kind of go away a little bit in the sense of that they're no longer this incredible, amazing person and I can't explain why they love them. No. It goes from being this, overwhelmingly amazing thing to having to work at it. And you have to work at being in love with this person that you chose every single day. So love as a noun is an idea. It is an incredible idea. It's the best idea. It's the most beautiful, most worthwhile idea that we as people are probably ever going to experience. But love as a verb is a choice. And it's a choice that you have to make every single day. Now, if you bring that back to empathy, empathy as a noun is an idea. It's an awesome idea. It is an idea that fosters collaboration, that improves communication, that makes being vulnerable okay. However, it is intangible until you turn it into something that other people can grasp. And that's why empathy as a verb is a choice. And it's a choice that you have to make on your own terms with every single different relationship that you have in your life. So empathy, again, it's going to be an individual choice, right? What you need from people in order to feel like they are showing you empathy is going to be different than what other people are going to need in order for them to feel like they are being shown empathy. And it's also, as a result of that, how you define it. And, you are going to have to define empathy on your own terms, both as a person, as well as, as a team, as a company, as an organization. I work with a lot of companies on creating, definitions of empathy that can go from the top all the way down to, just the individual person. And it's a very, very important process that, you have to do in order to really, make empathy tangible for every single person in your building. So now, empathy at work is going to require that everyone has some sort of equity and involvement in this process to really define and engage in empathy. And so how do we, include every single person in this process? Well, I actually have a story about how, I had to learn on my own how to really, engage empathy with other people and include them in this process of creating a more empathetic environment. And that involves creating my LinkedIn course. Now, when I view this image, obviously it's an incredibly professional product, and I am very proud of the work that we did together. However, the road to get here was incredibly bumpy. So when you work with them, they have their recording studios out in Southern California. And so I had gone out there, it was like a January, and it was 80 degrees and it was gorgeous the entire time I was there. So their offices are in this little beach town. Again, amazing, all of the palm trees, all of the mountains, the California sunshine. They had created this entire set that was just for, my course. They brought in this professional makeup artist to do my makeup. And I'm not gonna lie, I felt like Beyonce. I thought I was the coolest thing ever. I was the star, and they go out of their way to make you, as the author, as a creator, feel incredibly comfortable. So after all of this hyping up, after all of this amazingness, I finally had to actually go onto that set and do my course that I had worked so hard on. And I was staring at this. Now, this is a teleprompter, and if you've never used a teleprompter before, it can be incredibly intimidating because reading words but not sounding like you're actually reading words is incredibly challenging. On top of that, be a person who stutters, where the idea of having to read out loud is so terrifying. I would rather shave my head in front of 1,000 people. And so to be in front of this teleprompter with a camera, all of these lights, about 10 people in the room, and be told to read these words that I wrote that I was incredibly comfortable with, was one of the more demoralizing experiences of my life. And so I spent the first couple of days, trying to do things their way, trying to, do it how all of the other authors before me, had done it. And it was just the most terrible experience because it didn't matter how hard I try to be fluent, to, get those words out. It wasn't coming. Every word, almost every syllable, I stuttered. And I knew that I could do it, right? I knew that I could, quote unquote, be fluent and that it could be okay, but it was not coming through in my performance. So again, the first 2 days were terrible. And they went from being really excited and really positive to well, maybe we can have another person read your scripts. And it's fine if we don't use the scripts and, all of that stuff. And so, I had finally sort of come to terms with this idea that how everybody else has done it isn't going to work for me. And so I had to brainstorm ways to create the same kind of product, but in a way that I was going to be able to feel comfortable creating it. And so like that's when I said, okay, look, can I just be like in this room completely by myself, completely alone? And they said, yeah. And so like they allowed me to sort of, be alone in this studio and work at, my own pace. And as a result of that, I was able to create a product that, one, they could actually, have on their website, and two, that I could be proud of. And I learned a really valuable lesson about empathy and collaboration. Now, in order for empathy to be truly collaborative, you have to view empathy as a skill. And I hate the term soft skill because I don't agree with it. I think that all the skills that you learn are, hard skills. It's just that some of them are more technical and some are, non-technical, right? Empathy and communication are in those categories of non-technical skills. And, I learned then that in order to, really engage empathy as a non-technical skill, I had to be comfortable, telling them, here are the things that I need to have in order to really succeed in this system. I had to be vulnerable. I had to allow there to be a conversation around a topic that I'm not comfortable talking about all the time, which is, my speech, in order for there to be a breakthrough. And I always just like to add this picture because this was, like the last day, and I was like, I can't believe I actually did this, and hi, Mom, and it was great. But a couple days before this picture, I was crying in a restaurant during happy hour. Do not let this picture fool you. So how do you make empathy a skill, right? So there are some key empathy behaviors, and they are, the core components that are going to be required in order to really, engage in empathy actions and communication and beyond. It's going to be your process to really operationalize empathy and to develop truly sustainable empathy systems on the team level as well as the organizational level. And it's going to be your own personal approach to empathetic communication. So these key empathy behaviors, they are going to fall into three just broad categories. And those categories are patience, perspective, connection. And I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, but I will give access to the slides, and I'm going to be available for, questions and everything afterwards. So let's begin with patience. Now, patience is important because it's going to build resilience, right? The number one, trait that all successful people have, I think, is resilience. And you get that resilience from, being okay with delayed gratification. How do you get to that delayed gratification? You are incredibly patient. You are a lot more effective at, handling and managing stress as a result of being just more patient and knowing how to really, cultivate that patience and calm yourselves in times where, things can be a little bit heightened. And you just have a much greater control over the way you think about and approach things. So what is the actual, process of being patient like when you are, actively trying to be patient? Well, you are going to want to focus on being 100% present. So we live in a world where we are constantly being bombarded with content. We have a 24-hour news cycle on about 100 different channels. We have social media that's constantly, updated. There's always a thing going on. We have emails, we have texts, we, God forbid, have phone calls. And they're always coming at us 1,000 miles a minute. And we forget that, there are people who are right in front of us who need our attention at that moment. And so the core of being patient is really just being present and just giving this person in front of you the time and attention and the energy that they deserve. And so that's going to require just stopping, right? Turning over your phone, not paying attention to your computer, and just giving this person in front of you everything like that you have. A thing that, I like to tell my clients is to always remember the why. We get in these conversations or we get in these meetings, and it's so easy to sort of, get off track. And as a result of getting off track, our minds begin to wander. But if we always keep the why of our conversations and of our interactions in mind, then we are going to be able to be a lot more engaged in that conversation. It's just going to make us a lot more patient in the long run. Now, the second key empathy behavior is perspective. This one is incredibly important because perspective, it really is going to be the foundation of, understanding where another person is coming from. So it's kind of defined as, a particular way of, viewing things that are going to depend on, your own personal experiences, right? And it's also the ability to consider things in an accurate and fair way. Now, those, two underlined words, accurate and fair, those are going to go back to, bias, right? And trying to really counter biases in a way that's going to be, actually successful, right? So, what is bias? It's not a bad thing. It is completely natural. And, our biases are coming from just our, everyday lived experiences as people, right? But the problem is that we sort of, turn our own personal experiences and the, very sort of small corner of the world that we reside in, and we use those opinions against other people who don't, share those same experiences as us. And so, it's dependent on things like our education level, our race, our ethnicity. And, all of those things, again, are incredibly important parts of us because they create, who we are, and they give the world a very specific perspective that, only we can give. However, we tend to weaponize our experiences, and that causes some bias when we are dealing with people that, are not exactly like us. So perspective, again, is going to be the, roots of, truly understanding other people. It's going to force us and encourage us to cultivate, sincere relationships through listening to other people's experiences. As a result of that, we're going to have a lot more context for, why people are the way they are, why they do the things that they do, and why they think how they think. And as a result of that transparency, we're going to have a much better understanding of all of those around us. And as a result of that understanding, we will be able to trust people a lot more. So how do you really engage perspective? The first thing that I'm going to tell you about this is that you do not know everything. You do not know what's going on in another person's life. You don't have context for every single thing that goes on in their life when they are not with you. And it's always important to remember that, right? A person can have a bad day, and they're going to bring their, bad day emotions and their bad day biases and their bad day feelings into the office. And it's not your fault. It's also not your responsibility to, take on their, bad day feels, and sort of weave them into how you approach them and your day as well. And so it's always important to really think before you speak. I mean, I know that this is a thing that we have talked about ever since we were, young kids, but it is really important to, always take a beat before you say something. A lot of the times in these conversations that we're having, we're not always speaking from a place of thoughtfulness. We're being reactive. And so if you, take a breath and you remind yourself that, again, you don't know everything that's going on in this person's life. So you have no idea what they are, actually going through every day, or, in the mornings, or anything it is, right? You are going to be able to talk to them from a place that is going to be a lot more thoughtful as well as intentional. Another reason why you want to think before you speak is because, we don't always hear what people say to us. We hear our opinion of what they say to us. And so if you, take a deep breath and you repeat what they have said to you back to them, you are going to get a lot more clarity on exactly what they are saying, right? And exactly what they are feeling. And that's really going to help you minimize the natural biases that you are going to experience during almost every conversation. And so the final key empathy behavior is connection. And I always like to end all my talks on this because connection is, it's why we are communicating in the first place. I want you to think about every conversation that you have had at this conference. Even if it's been just a completely transactional conversation, you formed a new connection. You formed a new relationship. And it's always important to sort of, view every time you are even just having a casual conversation with a person as an opportunity to truly connect with them. Just a couple of things to keep in mind here is that, every interaction is going to be its own entity. Every conversation that you have with a person is going to be another opportunity to really, build and grow and cultivate an even better relationship. And you always want to speak with intention first and then for impact second. Always be intentional with everything like that you say. And being intentional is going to mean being thoughtful and having perspective and really keeping those biases down to a minimum. And then to, close this whole thing out, I just want to say that this is the beginning. Every time you talk to someone is an opportunity to continue to build and grow your relationship. It's also an opportunity for you to grow and evolve as an individual. So if you communicate with empathy, if you focus on creating, very positive communication experiences, you are going to be able to be better collaborators and build really beautiful experiences, both for your teams as well as your customers. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you for a great talk. There are some questions, and the one that's voted highest is about neurodivergence. So,
about what?
Neurodivergence. So
Okay.
Instead of being neurotypical. So this one's saying, I'm neurodivergent, so empathy is not a matter of choice for me. Do you have any advice for us ND folks who can't do empathy, or are we doomed?
I don't think anyone is doomed, right? I have a couple of friends who are, on the spectrum. And I think that they're actually more empathetic, which is very interesting because when you talk to them, there is a transparency there, right? There's no, judgment, right? And so you are, talking to a person who isn't filtering all of their thoughts and things through the whole societal norms, right? And so I think that you should use that, to your advantage, right? Like you're not... because you are coming from, a different place, and you view the world in a very different way, you are going to be able to, one, give, other people a perspective on, different topics that we would just never understand. And two, you are going to be able to give a lot of people just clarity. And it's uncomfortable to talk about things in a way that is not overly like politically correct, but you being able to just, like talk about things and to not be so concerned about consequences, that's actually going to make it a lot easier for people to really, see things in a way that is not going to be biased. I hope that helps answer your question. I think that's an incredibly interesting topic, and I'm going to do some research on that because I think that that's really, really interesting.
Thank you for that answer. I think we'll take time for one more question.
Okay.
Where do you see the difference between empathy and compassion?
I mean, I think it's compassion to me, it can be a little bit passive, right? When you are compassionate, I think that there is a little bit more emphasis on having a little bit of sympathy, and you're putting your feelings 100% first. And it's not 100% about you. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's really important to have compassion. I think it allows us to feel things for people that we would not normally feel. However, with empathy, your whole goal is to get perspective. You are trying to not just, have compassion for another person's experience. You are also trying to take it a step further and, understand where their perspective is coming from, right? It's very easy to just, end things at, well, I'm compassionate. No. You can be compassionate, and that can be the entryway to having more challenging conversations around where this person is coming from, why they view the world, how they view the world, and how their experiences can change your mind and help you to really evolve as a person, right? You always want to focus on trying to improve yourself to be, better for your partners or for your, teams or for your companies or for your customers. Compassion is the first step. Empathy is going to take you further.
Brilliant. Let's thank Sharon one more
welcome.
time.